A black single dad helps a lost rich girl find her parents, but when they return with $1 million check, shocking secrets tear the town apart. Will kindness be enough to heal hearts? Or will prejudice destroy everything? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The late afternoon rain drummed against the windshield of Marcus Johnson's old pickup truck as he navigated the slick streets of Pine Grove. Windshield wipers squeaked back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the downpour. His calloused hands gripped the steering wheel, still carrying traces of motor oil from a long day at the auto shop. "How was choir practice, baby girl?" Marcus glanced at Ava, who sat beside him humming one of her church songs. "We learned a new song today, Daddy." Ava's face lit up, her braids swaying as she turned to him. "Pastor James says I might get to sing the solo part next Sunday." Marcus smiled, warmth spreading through his tired body. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Your mama would have been so proud." The mention of her mother made Ava quiet for a moment, but she quickly bounced back. "Can we have hot chocolate when we get home? It's perfect weather for it." "Sure thing, baby. Marcus squinted through the rain-streaked windshield. Wait a minute. There, beneath the dim glow of the bus stop light, stood a small figure. A little girl, no more than Ava's age, clutched something to her chest. Her expensive-looking dress was soaked through, and she seemed to be shivering. "Daddy, look!" Ava pressed her hands against the passenger window. "She's all alone. We have to help her." Marcus hesitated, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. He knew how this could look, a black man approaching a white child, especially in this town. But he couldn't just drive past. His mama had raised him better than that. "Stay in the truck, Ava," he said firmly, pulling over to the curb. "But Daddy, just for a minute, okay?" Marcus turned on his hazard lights and stepped out into the rain. His work boots splashed through puddles as he approached the bus stop, moving slowly to avoid startling the girl. "Hey there," he called out softly, keeping his distance. "Are you lost?" The little girl looked up, her blue eyes wide with fear. She hugged what Marcus could now see was a stuffed rabbit, its floppy ears dark with rain. Her blonde hair was plastered to her face, and she wore patent leather shoes that probably cost more than his weekly paycheck. "It's okay," Marcus said, crouching down to her level. "I'm not going to hurt you. My daughter Ava's right there in the truck. We just want to help." As if on cue, Ava's door creaked open. "Daddy, I'm coming out." "Ava Johnson, you stay put." But she was already splashing toward them, her yellow raincoat a bright spot in the gloom. "Hi," Ava said, smiling warmly at the girl. "I'm Ava, I'm 10. Your rabbit is cute." The lost girl's grip on her stuffed animal loosened slightly. "His name is Hoppy," she whispered. "That's a good name." Ava nodded approvingly. "You're getting all wet out here. We have hot chocolate at home, right, Daddy?" Marcus watched as the girl's fear began to fade, replaced by uncertainty. He knew he should call the police right away, but first, they needed to get her out of this rain. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "Emily," she replied, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Emily, we can help you find your parents, but let's get you somewhere dry first, okay? The police station is just a few blocks away." At the mention of police, Emily's lower lip trembled. "I don't know where they are. We were at the big hotel, and then..." She hugged Hoppy tighter. "Come on," Ava said, holding out her hand. "You can share my raincoat." Emily hesitated for just a moment before taking Ava's hand. Marcus watched as his daughter led the lost girl to the truck, sharing her yellow raincoat like an umbrella. His heart swelled with pride at Ava's instinctive kindness, even as worry gnawed at his mind. Back in the truck, Ava chatted away while Marcus turned up the heat. He grabbed an old blanket from behind the seat and passed it back to Emily, who had climbed into the rear bench. "Here you go, Emily. Wrap up tight so you don't catch cold." "Thank you," she murmured, bundling herself and Hoppy in the worn blanket. The contrast between her designer dress and his old work blanket wasn't lost on Marcus. "Daddy makes the best hot chocolate," Ava was saying. "He puts in extra marshmallows, and sometimes we have cookies too. Do you like cookies?" Emily nodded, some color returning to her cheeks as the truck's heater worked its magic. "My nanny makes cookies sometimes, but Mommy says they have too much sugar." Marcus caught her eye in the rearview mirror. Emily, can you tell me where you last saw your parents, or what hotel you were staying at? The big one with the fancy fountain, Emily said. We were in the lobby, and I was looking at the fish tank, and then, her voice cracked. Then I couldn't find them anywhere. I walked outside to look, but everything looked different in the rain. Marcus knew the hotel she meant, the Grand Plaza downtown, where rooms cost more per night than he made in a week. That's quite a walk from here, honey. Your parents must be worried sick. Daddy, Ava spoke up, can Emily stay with us until we find them? Please? She can sleep in my room. Before Marcus could respond, Emily's composure crumbled completely. Tears mixed with raindrops on her face as she clutched Hoppy to her chest. Her next words came out in a frightened whisper that made Marcus's heart ache. I can't find Mommy and Daddy. Looking at her in his rearview mirror, Marcus felt the weight of this moment settle over him. Here was this lost little girl, probably from a wealthy family, in his old truck with his daughter. He knew what some people in town would think, what assumptions they might make. But as he watched Ava reach back to hold Emily's hand, he knew he had to do what was right, regardless of the consequences. Marcus carried Emily through his front door, her small body shivering against his chest. Water dripped from her expensive Mary Jane shoes onto the worn welcome mat. The kitchen light flickered on, casting a warm yellow glow over the modest space with its faded curtains and well-loved furniture. Ava, honey, can you get the blue blanket from the closet? Marcus asked, his voice gentle as he settled Emily into one of the mismatched kitchen chairs. The little girl's teeth chattered, her blonde hair plastered to her face. Yes, Daddy. Ava darted down the hallway, her footsteps quick and determined. Marcus knelt in front of Emily, his kind eyes meeting her frightened ones. Let's get you warmed up, sweetheart. Would you like some hot cocoa? Emily nodded, clutching her soggy stuffed rabbit closer. The toy's long ears drooped, dripping water onto the linoleum floor. Ava returned, the soft blue blanket bundled in her arms. With careful movements, she wrapped it around Emily's shoulders. This is my favorite blanket, she said with a warm smile. It always makes me feel better when I'm scared. Marcus moved to the stove, pulling out a worn saucepan. The familiar motions of making hot cocoa gave his worried hands something to do. He poured in milk, watching it swirl as he added chocolate powder and a tiny pinch of cinnamon, his late wife's special touch. I'm Ava, his daughter said, pulling up a chair next to Emily. What's your bunny's name? Mr. Hops, Emily whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle bubbling of warming milk. That's a good name, Ava nodded seriously. Do you think Mr. Hops would like to get dried off too? Emily loosened her grip on the stuffed animal slightly, looking uncertain. We can use my hairdryer on the low setting, Ava suggested. That's what Daddy does with my stuffed animals when they get wet. Marcus poured the hot cocoa into a mug with careful hands, adding a few mini marshmallows from the jar they kept for special occasions. Here you go, Emily. Careful now, it's hot. Emily wrapped her small hands around the warm mug, some color returning to her pale cheeks. She took a tiny sip, then another. Emily, Marcus said gently, pulling up a chair. Can you tell me what happened? How did you get separated from your parents? The little girl's lower lip trembled. We were driving. Somewhere. Stopped for gas. She clutched Mr. Hops tighter. I needed to use the bathroom. When I came out, they were gone. Marcus's heart clenched. Do you remember which gas station or where you were going? Emily shook her head, tears welling up in her blue eyes. I walked and walked, trying to find them. Marcus reached for the phone on the kitchen wall, dialing the police station. Officer Pete, who he knew from his work at the auto shop, answered. Pete, it's Marcus Johnson. I found a lost little girl. He explained the situation, watching as Ava showed Emily how to dip her marshmallows in the cocoa. We'll look into it, Officer Pete said, his voice crackling through the receiver. But with this storm, and without more information, it might take some time. Can you keep her safe for now? Marcus glanced at Emily, who was now leaning slightly against Ava as his daughter told her about their cat, Pepper, who was probably hiding under a bed because of the thunder. "Of course," he answered. "Just please find her family." After hanging up, Marcus approached the girls. "Emily, the police are going to look for your parents, but it might take a little while. Would it be okay if you stayed here tonight?" Emily's eyes widened with fear. She reached out suddenly, grabbing Marcus's hand. "Don't leave me," she pleaded, her small fingers trembling. "Hey, it's all right," he soothed, squeezing her hand gently. "No one's leaving you. You're safe here." "Can she sleep in my room, Daddy?" Ava asked, already bouncing with excitement. "We can make a pillow fort." Marcus checked his watch. 9:30 p.m. Well past bedtime, but these were special circumstances. "How about we get you both ready for bed? Ava, can you loan Emily some pajamas?" The girls headed to Ava's room, Emily still clutching Mr. Hops, while Marcus gathered extra pillows and blankets. He could hear Ava's cheerful voice explaining where everything was, showing Emily her collection of stuffed animals, treating her like a long-lost friend rather than a stranger. After helping them brush their teeth and making sure they were settled in Ava's twin bed, Emily insisted on sleeping close to Ava. Marcus pulled up the colorful quilt his wife had made years ago. "Would you like a bedtime story?" he asked, noting how Emily's eyes were already growing heavy. "Yes, please," both girls answered in unison. He chose a short one about a lost puppy finding its way home, his voice soft and steady. By the time he finished, Emily's breathing had evened out, her small hand still holding onto Ava's. "Good night, sweetheart," he whispered, kissing Ava's forehead. "You're being such a good friend." "Night, Daddy," Ava yawned. "God will help us find Emily's parents, right?" "Yes, baby, he will." Marcus quietly closed the door and made his way to the living room. The rain continued its steady rhythm against the windows as he sank into his old armchair. Closing his eyes, he clasped his hands together. "Lord," he whispered into the quiet room, "guide me. Help me protect these children. Help us find Emily's family. And," he paused, his throat tight, "give me strength to do what's right, whatever comes next." The prayer hung in the darkness, accompanied only by distant thunder and the soft sounds of two little girls sleeping peacefully down the hall. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, casting golden squares on the faded linoleum floor. Marcus stood at the stove, his worn apron dusted with flour as he flipped another perfectly round pancake. The familiar sizzle of butter on the griddle filled the warm air. "Daddy, you're doing it wrong," Ava giggled, perched on her usual spot at the counter. "You forgot to make Mickey Mouse ears." Marcus chuckled, the sound deep and rich. "Oh, is that right? Well, maybe this pancake wants to be a regular circle today." "Nobody wants to be regular," Ava declared with all the wisdom of her 10 years. She swung her legs back and forth, her pink pajamas catching the morning light. Their laughter drifted up the stairs and into Ava's bedroom, where Emily lay curled up in the spare bed they'd set up last night. Her eyes fluttered open, confusion crossing her face for a moment, before remembering where she was. The stuffed rabbit was still clutched tightly in her arms, its ear slightly damp from her tears. The sound of happiness downstairs pulled at her like a gentle tide. Emily slipped out of bed, her borrowed nightgown, one of Ava's, falling past her knees. She padded to the doorway, hesitating there as she watched the scene below through the railing. "Good morning, sunshine," Marcus called up, spotting her. His smile was warm and steady, like the morning light itself. "Are you hungry? We've got quite the pancake operation going down here." Ava spun around on her stool. "Emily, come sit by me. Daddy makes the best pancakes in the whole world." Emily descended the stairs slowly, each step careful and measured. When she reached the bottom, the rich smell of butter and maple syrup wrapped around her like a hug. "There's a special stool just for you," Marcus said, pulling out the chair next to Ava. He'd already set out a fresh plate and fork, as if he'd been expecting her all along. Emily climbed up, her feet finding the metal bar to rest on. She watched as Marcus poured more batter onto the griddle, his movements sure and practiced. "Want to see something cool?" Ava asked, scooting closer. "Daddy can flip pancakes without using a spatula. Show her, Daddy." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Now, that's a special occasion move, but He gripped the handle of the pan, giving it a little shake to test the pancake's readiness. With one smooth motion, he flipped the pancake into the air. It turned over perfectly, landing with a satisfying sizzle. Emily's eyes widened, and the tiniest smile tugged at her lips. "Ta-da!" Ava clapped. "See? I told you." He was magic. The smile grew a little bigger on Emily's face as Marcus slid a golden brown pancake onto her plate. He'd somehow managed to make this one with Mickey Mouse ears after all. "Thank you," Emily whispered, her voice small but steady. As they ate, Ava chatted about everything and nothing. Her favorite cartoons, the time she tried to teach their cat to do backflips, the best hiding spots in the backyard. Emily listened, taking small, careful bites of her pancake. After breakfast, while Marcus cleaned up the dishes, Ava pulled Emily into the living room. "Want to learn a game? It's super fun." Emily nodded, still clutching her rabbit. "Okay, so it goes like this." Ava held out her hands, palms up. "Miss Mary Mac, 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 all dressed in black, black, black." She demonstrated the clapping pattern, hands together, then partners, then cross, then back. Emily watched intently, setting her rabbit carefully on the couch. She held out her own hands, smaller and paler than Ava's. "That's it," Ava encouraged as Emily tried to follow along. "Now faster." They stumbled through the rhythm a few times, giggling when they got tangled up. Marcus watched from the kitchen doorway, dish towel still in his hands, as Emily's face lit up with a real smile. The first since they'd found her. The phone rang, cutting through their laughter. Marcus dried his hands and answered it, moving into the hallway for privacy. Emily's eyes followed him, her hands dropping to her sides. "Yes, this is Marcus Johnson," he said quietly into the receiver. "I see. No leads yet?" "Yes, she's doing fine." "No, that's not necessary, we can. I understand. Yes, we'll stay close to home. Thank you, officer." He returned to find Emily standing in the kitchen doorway, her rabbit back in her arms. The smile had faded, but there was something else in her eyes now, a spark of hope mixed with fear. "That was the police," Marcus explained, kneeling down to her level. "They're still looking for your parents, but it might take a little while longer. Would it be okay if you stayed with us until they find them?" Emily's fingers tightened on her rabbit's ears. "You won't send me away?" "No, sweetheart. Not unless you want to go." Emily stepped forward suddenly, wrapping her arms around Marcus's waist, her face pressed against his stomach, and her words came out muffled but clear. "You feel like home." Marcus placed a gentle hand on her head, feeling the weight of those words settle in his heart. Ava joined them, completing the circle with her own hug. The morning sun continued to pour through the window, warming the small kitchen and the three people standing in its light. Outside, cars passed by, and birds called to each other in the maple trees. But in that moment, in that embrace, time seemed to pause, held still by the simple truth of a child's trust and the answering echo of love that promised to keep her safe. Marcus pushed the squeaky shopping cart down aisle 3 of Morton's grocery, its wheels protesting with each turn. Ava skipped alongside, her braids bouncing, while Emily held tight to the cart's metal side, her other hand clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her designer shoes clicked softly against the linoleum floor, a stark contrast to Ava's worn sneakers. "Can we get Lucky Charms, Daddy?" Ava pointed to the colorful cereal boxes stacked neatly on the shelves. Marcus checked his wallet, counting the worn bills inside. "How about we split the difference? Store brand this time, baby girl." Emily watched the exchange quietly, her pearl button cardigan and pressed skirt making her stand out like a rose in a garden of daisies. Marcus noticed Mrs. Peterson from 2 streets over doing a double take as she passed, her eyes widening at the sight of Emily's clothes. "Look what they have." Ava tugged Emily toward a display of fresh strawberries. "These are the best when Daddy makes pancakes." Emily's face lit up. "Really? My nanny never lets me help in the kitchen." A sharp whisper cut through the air. "Did you see that little girl with them?" Marcus pretended not to hear, but his shoulders tensed as he reached for a loaf of bread. More whispers followed, like insects buzzing in the summer heat. Those clothes must cost more than his monthly salary. Someone should call somebody. Marcus guided the cart toward the dairy section, keeping his movements deliberate and calm. He'd learned long ago that dignity was the best shield against prejudice. Emily pressed closer to him, her small hand finding its way into his. "You okay there, sweetheart?" he asked softly. She nodded, but her eyes darted nervously around the store. Ava, sensing her friend's discomfort, linked arms with her. "Want to help me pick out the best apples? I know the secret way to tell if they're sweet." At the produce section, Marcus carefully selected fruits while keeping both girls in sight. Mrs. Thompson, the clerk who'd worked there for 20 years, watched them with narrowed eyes from behind her register. "That rich girl doesn't belong with him," she muttered to another cashier, loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Just look at those clothes. Something's not right here." Emily's lower lip trembled. Marcus knelt down to her level, his voice gentle but firm. "Hey now, remember what we said about being brave? Sometimes people say silly things because they don't understand, but that's their problem, not ours." Ava squeezed Emily's hand. "Yeah, and Daddy always says, what matters is what's in here." She pointed to her heart, making Emily smile, despite her worry. They made their way through the remaining aisles, Marcus adding essentials to their cart, while trying to ignore the growing number of stares. Mr. Rivera, usually friendly from the meat counter, wouldn't meet his eyes. The teenage bag boy who often joked with Ava suddenly found the floor fascinating. At the checkout, Marcus placed their items on the conveyor belt, his movements measured and precise. Emily helped, carefully arranging the groceries while Ava chatted about their plans to bake cookies later. The cashier, a new girl Marcus didn't recognize, kept glancing between Emily and him, her fingers hesitating over the register keys. "Island, is everything okay here?" she asked, her voice thick with suspicion. "Everything's fine," Marcus replied evenly, though his heart pounded. "Just getting some groceries with my daughter and her friend." Emily moved closer to Marcus, wrapping her arms around his waist. The gesture, meant to seek comfort, only seemed to increase the cashier's unease. As Marcus paid for their groceries, he noticed a small crowd gathering near the store's front windows. Their faces wore expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. A police cruiser rolled slowly through the parking lot, and Marcus's stomach tightened. "Time to go, girls," he said quietly, keeping his voice steady for their sake. He guided them toward the exit, pushing the cart with one hand while the other rested protectively on Emily's shoulder. Ava walked on his other side, her usual bounce subdued. The automatic doors slid open with a hiss, and Marcus felt the weight of dozens of eyes following their every move. He helped the girls into his truck first, then loaded the groceries, all while maintaining the calm demeanor he'd perfected over years of facing prejudice. As he closed the truck's creaky door, he caught sight of his reflection in the window. A hard-working father, just trying to do right by a child in need. But in the suspicious eyes of the town, he saw how they viewed him. A threat, a mystery to be solved, a problem to be handled. Marcus started the engine, the familiar rumble, a small comfort in the growing tension. Through the rearview mirror, he watched Emily and Ava holding hands in the back seat, their innocent friendship a reminder of why he had to stay strong. In the parking lot, people stood in small clusters, their phones out, their whispers carrying on the breeze. Some took pictures of his license plate. Others pointed at Emily's expensive clothes, visible through the truck's windows. Mrs. Thompson stood in the store's doorway, her hand pressed to her chest as she spoke urgently into a phone. The police cruiser had parked across the lot, its presence a silent warning. Marcus pulled out of the parking space, keeping his movements smooth and unhurried. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him rush away like a guilty man. As they drove past the store's large front windows, the faces behind the glass blurred together, a wall of judgment and suspicion that Marcus knew would only grow stronger. The kitchen table was covered with worksheets and colorful pencils as warm yellow light spilled from the overhead fixture. Marcus leaned over Emily's shoulder, pointing at her math problem with a patient smile. "So if Jenny has 12 apples and gives away 5, How many does she have left? He asked softly. Emily's forehead wrinkled in concentration as she counted on her fingers. 7 apples, she declared triumphantly. That's right. Marcus gave her a gentle high five while Ava worked on her own homework across the table, her tongue sticking out slightly as she focused on her reading assignment. The peaceful evening routine felt natural, as if Emily had always been part of their little family. Marcus watched the 2 girls working side by side, their heads bent over their papers. Emily's expensive sweater stood in stark contrast to Ava's well-worn t-shirt, but the girls didn't seem to notice or care about such differences. A sharp knock at the front door shattered the quiet moment. Emily jumped, her pencil clattering to the floor. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder before standing up. It's okay, he said calmly, though his heart had started beating faster. You girls keep working. I'll see who at Island. When he opened the front door, 2 police officers stood on his worn welcome mat. The porch light cast harsh shadows across their serious faces. Good evening, Mr. Johnson, said the taller officer, Officer Brooks, according to his nameplate. We need to ask you some additional questions about the girl. Marcus's stomach tightened, but he kept his voice steady. Of course. Please, come in. He led them to the living room, keeping his movements deliberate and calm despite the anxiety building in his chest. The officers remained standing, their hands resting near their belts. We've received some concerning calls from members of the community, said Officer Brooks, his eyes scanning the modest room. Several people have expressed worry about the situation here. The shorter officer, Martinez, cut in more directly. Some folks are suggesting you might have taken the girl yourself, Mr. Johnson. That maybe she didn't just show up at that bus stop. The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He took a deep breath, forcing down the anger and hurt that threatened to rise. I understand you have to follow up on reports, he said carefully. But I found that child alone and scared in the rain. I called you immediately. I've cooperated with everything you've asked. Yet you've kept her here, Officer Brooks noted, his tone sharp. In your home, instead of letting her go to protective services, because she was terrified. Marcus's voice rose slightly before he caught himself. She needed somewhere safe, warm, and caring. My daughter Ava is her age. I couldn't just, Daddy? Ava's small voice came from the kitchen doorway. Both girls stood there, Emily clutching her stuffed rabbit tight against her chest. It's okay, baby, Marcus said softly. The officers just need to ask some questions. Emily stepped forward, her lower lip trembling, but her chin held high. Are you going to make me leave? She asked the officers, her voice quavering. Officer Martinez knelt down to her level. We just want to make sure you're safe, sweetheart, that you're here because you want to be. Mr. Marcus saved me, Emily burst out, tears spilling down her cheeks. I was so scared and cold, and he gave me hot chocolate and a warm bed and helped me not be afraid anymore. She ran to Marcus, wrapping her arms around his waist. He's my safe place. Please don't make me go. Marcus placed a protective hand on Emily's shoulder, meeting the officer's eyes steadily. I'm just trying to help this child until we find her parents. That's all. I'm a father. I couldn't leave her alone and afraid. Officer Brooks's expression softened slightly as he watched Emily cling to Marcus. Can you tell us more about how you got separated from your parents, honey? Through her tears, Emily explained about the gas station, the bathroom break, getting confused about which car was her parents'. Her story matched exactly what she'd told Marcus that first night. After several more questions, the officers seemed satisfied, at least for the moment. We'll need to file a report about this, Officer Brooks said, and we'll be checking in regularly. I understand, Marcus replied, walking them to the door. I want what's best for Emily, too. After they left, Marcus sent the girls back to their homework with gentle reassurance. He returned to the kitchen table, but couldn't focus on the worksheets anymore. Instead, he sat with his head in his hands, the weight of the day pressing down on his shoulders. The whispers in town, the suspicious glances, and now this all because he'd tried to help a lost child. The familiar ache of injustice settled in his chest, heavy and cold. He thought of his late wife, how she'd always said to keep faith in people's better nature. But tonight, That faith felt badly shaken. He could hear the girls whispering together, Ava comforting Emily in her own child's way. Their innocent friendship didn't see color or class, they just saw each other. If only adults could be so wise, he thought. Marcus raised his head and looked at the ceiling, fighting back tears of frustration. The shadows of prejudice had followed him all his life, but having it poison something as pure as helping a scared little girl that cut deep. Still, he straightened his shoulders. He wouldn't let fear or other people's judgment stop him from doing what was right. Emily's small voice broke through his thoughts. "Mr. Marcus, I can't figure out this next math problem." He took a deep breath, pushed his pain aside, and turned back to the girls with a gentle smile. "Let's look at it together," he said, pulling his chair closer to help. Sitting there at his kitchen table, surrounded by homework and the warm presence of two trusting children, Marcus felt both the weight of his responsibility and the strength of his conviction. No matter what anyone thought or said, he would continue to be the safe harbor these girls needed, both of them. The evening shadows stretched long across Marcus's front porch as he sat in his weathered rocking chair, the wood creaking softly beneath him. Pastor James settled into the chair beside him, his weathered face kind in the fading light. The air was thick with humidity after the day's rain, carrying the sweet scent of wet grass and blooming jasmine. "I don't know what to do, Pastor," Marcus said quietly, his voice heavy with worry. "These rumors, they're getting worse. Those officers today, the way they looked at me." He rubbed his hands over his face, exhausted. Inside the house, pressed against the living room window, Ava and Emily huddled together, their small faces partially hidden behind the curtain. Emily clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly, while Ava held her friend's free hand. Pastor James folded his hands in his lap, his eyes warm with understanding. "Marcus, I've known you since you were Ava's age. You've always done what's right, even when it wasn't easy." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Remember when your Sarah passed, and you kept going, kept loving, kept believing?" Marcus's eyes grew misty at the mention of his late wife. "That was different. This time, I could lose everything. They're saying I kidnapped her, Pastor. Me, who's never hurt anyone in my life." Through the window, Emily's grip on her rabbit tightened. Ava squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Truth will outlast gossip, son," Pastor James said firmly. "It always does. Like morning sun burning away fog. Our job isn't to fight the fog. It's to stand firm until the sun does its work." A moth fluttered around the porch light, casting dancing shadows. Marcus watched it, thinking about the pastor's words. But what about the girls? Ava shouldn't have to deal with this kind of hatred. And Emily, he shook his head. She's already been through so much. Inside, Emily's lower lip trembled. She tugged on Ava's sleeve, and they crept away from the window, tiptoeing to the kitchen. "Are you going to send me away?" Emily's voice was barely a whisper as she looked up at Marcus, who had just come in from the porch. Her blue eyes were wide with fear, her small fingers still wrapped around her rabbit's ears. Marcus knelt down to her level, his heart aching at the vulnerability in her voice. "Emily, honey, come here." He opened his arms, and she rushed into them, burying her face in his shoulder. "I'm not sending you anywhere. We're going to keep you safe until we find your parents. That's a promise." Ava joined the hug, wrapping her arms around both of them. "We're like a family now," she declared with the simple conviction of a child. Pastor James watched from the doorway, a gentle smile on his face. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he said softly. "Sometimes he sends us exactly what we need, even if we don't understand it at first." Later that night, Marcus sat on the edge of Ava's bed, where both girls lay curled up together. Emily had finally drifted off to sleep, her rabbit tucked under her chin, her face peaceful for the first time that day. Ava was still awake, watching her father with knowing eyes that seemed too wise for her years. "Daddy," she whispered, "are you scared?" Marcus reached out to smooth her hair back from her forehead, just as he used to do when she was smaller. "A little, baby. But being scared doesn't mean we stop doing what's right. Like when Mommy was sick," Ava said softly. "And you were scared, but you still smiled for me?" Marcus's heart squeezed in his chest. Just like that, the room was quiet except for Emily's soft breathing and the distant chirp of crickets outside. Marcus bowed his head, closing his eyes in silent prayer. The words came from deep within his heart. Lord, give me strength. Show me the way. Help me protect these children. Ava's small hand found his in the darkness. Pastor James is right, Daddy. The truth will win. Marcus opened his eyes to look at his daughter's face, seeing in it echoes of her mother's strength. Beside her, Emily stirred slightly in her sleep, instinctively curling closer to Ava. The sight filled Marcus with a mixture of love and fear. Love for these two precious children who had found each other, and fear of what tomorrow might bring. He continued his silent prayer, asking for guidance, for protection, for the wisdom to know what to do. The weight of responsibility pressed heavy on his shoulders, but there was also something else there. A deep, unshakable certainty that he was doing the right thing, no matter what anyone else might say. The night air drifted through the window, carrying with it the distant sound of a train whistle. Marcus remembered how his mother used to say that train whistles were God's way of reminding us that he was still awake, watching over his children. He held on to that thought now, drawing comfort from it as he watched over these two sleeping girls. One, his daughter by birth, the other his daughter by circumstance. Both of them were trusting him to keep them safe, to be their protector, their guardian. Despite his fears, despite the rumors swirling through town, despite the suspicious glances and whispered accusations, Marcus knew in his heart that he wouldn't let them down. He sat there a while longer, his prayer continuing in his heart, torn between his fear of what might come and his faith in what he knew was right. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a gentle glow over the sleeping children, and in that moment, Marcus felt a flicker of peace. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, for tonight at least, these two precious souls were safe, loved, and together. The morning sun painted Marcus's small kitchen in warm golden light as he flipped pancakes on the griddle. The sizzle of butter and sweet aroma of maple syrup filled the air. At the kitchen table, Ava helped Emily brush her hair, carefully working out the tangles with gentle strokes. "You have such pretty hair," Ava said, weaving Emily's blonde strands into a neat braid. "It's like sunshine," Emily smiled, holding still. "Your hair is prettier. It's bouncy and full of life, just like you." Marcus glanced over his shoulder, his heart warming at their interaction. The girls had grown so close in just a few days. He slid fresh pancakes onto their plates, decorated with banana slices for eyes and a strawberry smile. "Breakfast is served, ladies," he announced, setting the plates down. "Eat up, we need to leave a bit early today." Emily looked up, worry crossing her face. Are you taking me somewhere else?" Marcus quickly knelt beside her chair. "No, sweetheart. You're going to school with Ava today. I already spoke with the principal, and they're happy to have you join Ava's class until we find your parents." Relief flooded Emily's features. She picked up her fork, cutting into the pancake face. "I like school," she said softly. "At my old school, I had to wear a uniform." "Well, you look perfect in Ava's clothes," Marcus assured her, noting how Emily seemed more relaxed in Ava's simple t-shirt and jeans than she had in her expensive dress. After breakfast, Marcus helped the girls pack their backpacks. He slipped an extra juice box and cookie into Emily's lunch, knowing how comfort food could help on a tough day. The walk to school was short, with Ava pointing out her favorite spots along the way: the big oak tree where birds nested, the corner store that sold the best popsicles, the yellow house with the friendly old dog who always wagged his tail at passing children. At the school entrance, Marcus spotted Mrs. Thompson, Ava's teacher, arranging morning worksheets on her desk through the classroom window. "Girls, wait here a moment," he said, giving them each a quick hug before stepping into the classroom. Mrs. Thompson looked up, her kind face creasing with concern as Marcus approached. "Mr. Johnson, good morning. I got the principal's message about our new student." "Mrs. Thompson," Marcus spoke quietly, "I know this is an unusual situation. Emily's been through a lot, and with all these rumors going around, He paused, choosing his words carefully. Could you keep an extra eye on her? Make sure she's okay? The teacher nodded, understanding in her eyes. Of course. Ava's one of my best students, so kind and helpful. I'm sure she'll help Emily feel right at home. Marcus thanked her and called the girls in. Emily hesitated at the doorway, suddenly shy, but Ava took her hand and led her to her desk. You can sit next to me, Ava declared, pulling out the empty chair. As other students filtered in, Marcus noticed the whispers starting immediately. A group of girls huddled together, pointing and giggling. Two boys in the back row made exaggerated, rich girl gestures, pretending to sip tea with pinkies raised. Emily shrunk in her seat, her shoulders hunching, but Ava sat up straighter, her chin lifted proudly. Don't listen to them, she whispered to Emily. They're just jealous because you're special. Marcus lingered at the door, his heart aching. He wanted to protect Emily from every harsh word, every judgmental stare, but he knew he couldn't shield her forever. He watched as a girl with pigtails approached Emily's desk. Is it true you live in a mansion? The girl asked loudly. My mom says you must be scared living with. She glanced at Ava, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. You know them. Before Emily could respond, Ava stood up. Emily lives with us because we care about her, she said firmly, her voice carrying across the classroom. And my daddy is the kindest person in the whole world. He helps people who need help, which is more than I can say for some folks. Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat. All right, children, let's begin our day. Emily, welcome to our class. I think you'll find we're a family here, and families support each other. Marcus finally stepped away from the door, his eyes misty. He'd taught Ava to be strong, to stand up for what was right. But seeing her in action filled him with pride and worry in equal measure. How much burden were these children carrying because of adult prejudices? The school day passed slowly for Marcus. Between his shifts at the auto shop and his handyman jobs, his mind kept drifting to the girls. When 3 o'clock finally came, he was waiting outside the school gates, his heart lifting at the sight of Ava and Emily walking out together, their heads close in conversation. Emily's face was tired but peaceful, while Ava walked with her usual bounce. They didn't notice him immediately, and he heard Emily's quiet words to Ava as they approached. I wish he was my real daddy. Marcus pretended not to hear, but his heart squeezed tight in his chest. He waved to catch their attention, and both girls brightened, running to meet him. Emily's words echoed in his mind as he hugged them both, wondering how much longer he could protect this fragile happiness they'd found. The Saturday morning dawned bright and clear, a welcome change from the stormy weather earlier in the week. Marcus watched from his worn porch swing as Ava helped Emily tie her shoelaces, the two girls giggling over some shared secret. His daughter had taken to teaching Emily all sorts of little things, from clapping games to braiding hair, and the sight warmed his heart. Ready for the park, girls? Marcus called out, jingling his truck keys. Ready? They chorused, scrambling up from the steps. The local park wasn't anything fancy, just a patch of green with some playground equipment and a small duck pond. But to the girls, it might as well have been Disneyland. Emily's eyes grew wide as they pulled into the gravel parking lot, taking in the modest scene with unexpected wonder. Can we feed the ducks? She asked softly, clutching her ever-present stuffed rabbit. Marcus pulled a paper bag from his jacket pocket. Already thought of that. Got some old bread right here. The girls raced to the pond's edge, where a family of ducks paddled lazily in the morning sunday. Marcus followed more slowly, watching as Ava showed Emily how to tear the bread into small pieces and toss them gently onto the water. Emily's delighted laugh, when a bold duck waddled up to snatch a piece near her feet, echoed across the pond. Daddy, look, Ava called out. Emily's made a friend. The duck had indeed taken a liking to Emily, following her careful movements along the shore. Marcus couldn't help but notice how different Emily seemed here, relaxed, playful, just being a kid. Her expensive clothes were forgotten as she knelt in the grass, completely absorbed in the simple joy of feeding ducks. After the bread was gone, they moved to the playground. Marcus settled onto a bench, his heart full as he watched the girls take turns pushing each other on the swings. Emily's long hair streamed behind her as she pumped her legs, going higher and higher. "Look at me, Marcus," she called out, her face glowing with excitement. "I'm flying." It hit him then, how naturally Emily had fit into their little family. The void left by his wife's passing, that aching emptiness in their home, had somehow grown a little smaller since Emily arrived. She brought a different kind of energy, a sweetness that complemented Ava's spirited nature perfectly. Near the playground stood a bike rack with a few community bikes, old ones donated for any child to use. Marcus noticed Emily watching Ava hop on one with practiced ease. "Would you like to learn?" he asked Emily gently. She nodded, though her eyes showed a hint of fear. "My parents. They were always too busy to teach me." "Well, today's your lucky day," Marcus said, selecting a small blue bike with training wheels. "We've got all the time in the world." For the next hour, Marcus jogged alongside Emily, one hand steady on the back of her seat as she wobbled and squealed. Ava rode circles around them, calling out encouragement. "You're doing great, Emily. Just keep pedaling." When Emily finally managed to ride in a straight line without Marcus's help, her face lit up with such pure joy that it brought tears to his eyes. This was what being a father meant, not just providing shelter and food, but these precious moments of triumph, of teaching and growing together. "I did it," Emily exclaimed, circling back to where Marcus stood. "Did you see? I really did it." "You sure did, sweetheart," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. He helped her off the bike and was surprised when she threw her arms around his waist, hugging him tight. They stayed at the park until the sun began to sink toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the grass. The girls were pleasantly tired, their cheeks pink from exercise and excitement. Marcus loaded them into the truck, their chatter about the day's adventures filling the cab with warmth. As they pulled into his driveway, the golden light of sunset painted everything in soft hues. Emily had dozed off, her head resting against Ava's shoulder. It was such a perfect moment that Marcus wished he could freeze it in time. But reality intruded as soon as he stepped onto his porch. There, stuck to his front door with clear tape, was a white official envelope. Marcus's heart sank as he read the police department letterhead, requesting his presence for additional questioning about Emily's case. He quickly pulled the note down before the girls could see it, tucking it into his pocket. Their happy chatter continued behind him as he unlocked the door, but the weight of that paper felt like lead in his jacket, a harsh reminder that this perfect day was just a temporary reprieve from the challenges they faced. Marcus stared at the stark white walls of the police station's waiting room, his fingers drumming nervously on his knee. The metal chair felt cold and unwelcoming, much like the stares he'd received when he walked in. He'd left Emily and Ava with Pastor James at the church, promising to return soon, but the weight in his stomach told him this wouldn't be a quick visit. "Mr. Johnson," Officer Matthews called from a doorway. "This way, please." Marcus stood, straightening his worn jacket, and followed the officer down a narrow hallway. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the linoleum floor. They entered a small interview room with a metal table and 3 chairs. Detective Sarah Carter sat waiting, a thick folder open in front of her. Her expression was neutral, but Marcus noticed how her eyes tracked his every movement as he settled into the chair across from her. "Mr. Johnson," she began, shuffling through some papers. "We need to discuss the situation with Emily Whitmore." Marcus nodded, keeping his voice steady. "Of course. Has there been any progress finding her parents?" "That's part of what we need to discuss." Detective Carter leaned forward. "It's been several days now, Mr. Johnson. While we appreciate your initial assistance, this situation has become complicated." "Complicated how?" Marcus felt his shoulders tense. Officer Matthews, who had remained standing by the door, cleared his throat. "Child Protective Services has expressed concern about the current arrangement." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. "CPS? But Emily's safe with us. She's happy." "Mr. Johnson," Detective Carter's tone sharpened slightly. "You're a single father with limited means, housing a child who isn't yours, with no legal authority to do so. Surely you can understand our concerns." I understand your concerns, Marcus replied carefully, remembering Pastor James's advice about staying calm. But Emily trusts us. She feels safe with my daughter and me. That's not the point, Officer Matthews interjected. The point is, you have no legal right to keep her. Marcus straightened in his chair. I'm not keeping her. I'm protecting her until her parents are found. Detective Carter pulled out a form. CPS has facilities better equipped to handle cases like this. Professional staff, proper resources. She's not a case, Marcus interrupted, his voice firm but quiet. She's a little girl who's scared and needs stability right now. Mr. Johnson, Detective Carter sighed. We're trying to be reasonable here. But if you resist cooperating with CPS, things could become very difficult for you. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Are you suggesting I'd face legal trouble for helping a lost child? We're suggesting, Officer Matthews said, that continuing to house her without proper authority could be seen as problematic. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, thinking of Emily's smile that morning as she helped Ava make toast, the way she'd hugged him before he left, making him promise to come back soon. What exactly are you asking me to do? We need you to sign these papers. Detective Carter pushed a document across the table. Authorizing CPS to take temporary custody of Emily. Marcus stared at the papers but didn't touch them. And if I don't, then we'll have to consider whether your current actions constitute an illegal custody situation, Officer Matthews said coldly. The room felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in. Marcus thought about his daughter Ava, how she'd finally started smiling again after losing her mother, how Emily had brought light back into their home. He thought about Emily's terror at the mere suggestion of leaving them. I won't sign, Marcus said quietly. Detective Carter's eyebrows rose. Excuse me, I said, I won't sign. Marcus stood up slowly. Emily is safe. She's cared for. She's loved. Until her parents are found, she stays with us. Mr. Johnson, be reasonable. I am being reasonable, Marcus cut in, his voice steady despite his racing heart. I'm being reasonable by putting that child's well-being first. You want to take her from the only place she feels safe and put her with strangers. How is that helping her? Officer Matthews stepped forward. This isn't your decision to make. You're right, Marcus agreed. It's Emily's parents' decision, and until they're found, I'm not going to traumatize that little girl by sending her away with strangers. Detective Carter gathered her papers. This isn't over, Mr. Johnson. We'll be watching very closely. Watch all you want, Marcus replied, heading for the door. You'll see a little girl who's healing, who's happy, who's protected, and isn't that what matters most? He stepped out into the hallway, his legs feeling weak, but his resolve stronger than ever. The fluorescent light seemed harsher now, the corridor longer. Each step toward the exit felt heavy with the weight of what he'd just done. Rain had started falling outside, a gentle drizzle that matched his mood. Marcus pushed open the heavy glass doors, stepping out into the gray afternoon. His mind raced with worries about what might come next, how he'd protect both girls, whether he'd made the right choice. Then he heard it, the sound of small feet running on wet pavement. Marcus! Emily's voice cut through the rain. He looked up to see Emily breaking away from Pastor James, who stood by his car across the street. She was running full speed toward him, her blonde hair bouncing, completely ignoring the rain. Marcus knelt just in time to catch her as she threw herself into his arms. Her small hands gripped his jacket tightly, her face buried against his shoulder. You came back, she whispered, her voice muffled against his coat. You promised you'd come back, and you did. Marcus held her close, feeling her trembling slightly. Whether from the rain or emotion, he couldn't tell. Of course I came back, sweetheart. I'll always come back. Emily pulled back just enough to look at his face, her blue eyes serious. They want to take me away, don't they? Marcus's heart clenched at the fear in her voice. Nobody's taking you anywhere, he assured her, his voice gentle but firm. Not while I'm here. She tightened her grip on him, refusing to let go even as the rain fell harder. Promise? I promise, Marcus said, and in that moment, Looking into those trusting eyes, he knew he'd face whatever came next to keep that promise. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of First Baptist Church, casting colorful shadows across the worn wooden pews. Marcus sat with Emily and Ava in their usual spot, third row from the back, but today felt different. The usual warm atmosphere of Sunday service had turned heavy with tension. Mrs. Peterson, who always brought her famous potato salad to church potlucks, kept turning around to stare at them. Her husband whispered something in her ear, shaking his head. 2 rows ahead, the Thompson family huddled together, stealing glances over their shoulders. Emily wore her cleanest dress, one Marcus had carefully washed and ironed the night before. It was still clearly expensive, making her stand out among the modest Sunday clothes around her. She sat between Marcus and Ava, her small hand wrapped tightly around Marcus's larger one. "Why is everyone looking at us, Daddy?" Ava whispered, her dark eyes worried. Marcus squeezed her shoulder. "Just focus on Pastor James, sweetheart." Pastor James stood at the pulpit, his weathered face serious as he surveyed his divided congregation. "Today," he began, his voice steady and clear, "I want to talk about the Good Samaritan." The familiar rustling of Bible pages filled the church. Marcus noticed some people stiffening in their seats. "We all know the story," Pastor James continued. "A man is robbed, beaten, left for dead. Many pass him by, respected members of society, religious leaders, but who stops? A Samaritan. Someone the Jews looked down upon, someone they considered different, less worthy." His eyes swept across the congregation. That Samaritan didn't stop to wonder what others would think. He didn't worry about appearances or social standing. He saw someone in need and showed mercy. Mrs. Baker, who ran the local diner, nodded firmly. Several others murmured in agreement. But Marcus could see Mr. Wilson, the bank manager, crossing his arms, his face hard. "In our own community," Pastor James's voice grew stronger, "we have seen such an act of mercy. When Marcus Johnson found a lost, frightened child, he didn't hesitate. He opened his home, his heart." Emily pressed closer to Marcus's side. He could feel her trembling slightly. "Some have questioned his motives," Pastor James continued. "Some have spread rumors and doubt. But I ask you, isn't this exactly what Jesus taught us? To love our neighbors, to help those in need, regardless of what others might think?" The tension in the church was palpable. Marcus could hear angry whispers from somewhere behind him. Ava shifted uncomfortably in her seat. After the sermon, during the fellowship hour in the church basement, things came to a head. Marcus stood by the refreshment table, helping the girls get cookies and punch, when Mr. Wilson approached with several others. "Johnson," Mr. Wilson said, his voice carrying across the room, "this has gone on long enough." The casual chatter around them died down. Marcus felt Ava press against his leg. "That girl needs to be with her own kind," Mr. Wilson continued. "In her rightful place, not in some." He glanced around the modest church basement. "Situation like this. Her own kind?" Marcus repeated quietly, keeping his voice level despite the anger building in his chest. "She's a child who needs care and protection. That's the only kind that matters." Mrs. Peterson stepped forward. "It doesn't look right, Marcus. People are talking. What will happen to your reputation? To Ava's?" At the mention of her name, Ava burst into tears. "Why are you being so mean?" she sobbed. "Emily is our friend." Emily wrapped her arms around Ava, both girls crying now. The sight of their tears caused several church members to step forward. "Now see here," Mrs. Baker said firmly, moving to stand beside Marcus. "These children are hurting because of your cruel words. Is that what we teach in this church?" "The police should handle this," someone called from the back. "The police have been handling it." Pastor James's voice cut through the commotion. He had appeared quietly among them. "And until Emily's parents are found, she is safer with a caring family than in some impersonal system." The basement had divided into clear sides now, those standing with Marcus and those clustered near Mr. Wilson. The girls' sobs had quieted to sniffles, but the sound had left its mark on many faces. "Come on," Marcus said softly to the girls. "It's time for the closing hymn." They made their way back upstairs, followed by most of the congregation. As they settled into their pew, Marcus could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on them. The organ began to play Amazing Grace, and the familiar melody filled the church. Emily's small hand found Marcus's again. Her face was still wet with tears as she leaned close to whisper, "Please don't let them take me." Marcus held her hand tighter as the congregation sang, their voices rising and falling around them. Some sang with conviction, others barely moved their lips. But Marcus kept his head high, his voice strong, even as Emily's words echoed in his heart, even as he felt Ava trembling on his other side. The sunlight through the stained glass windows had shifted, casting new patterns across the church floor. Emily's grip never loosened as the final verses of Amazing Grace filled the air, her whispered plea hanging between them like a prayer. Marcus drummed his fingers on the kitchen counter, watching the girls do their homework. The weight of Sunday's church service still hung heavy in his heart. Every whisper, every judgmental glance had chipped away at his spirit. But looking at Emily and Ava, heads bent together over their math problems, he knew he needed to give them a break from it all. "How about we pack up and go fishing?" he suggested, his voice breaking through the afternoon quiet. Both girls' heads shot up, their eyes bright with excitement. Ava jumped from her chair, nearly knocking over her glass of milk. "Really, Daddy? Can we make a campfire too?" "You bet, sugar." Marcus smiled, already feeling lighter. "Emily, have you ever been fishing before?" Emily shook her head, her blonde curls bouncing. "No, but I've seen it in movies. Do we get to use those long stick things?" "Fishing poles," Ava corrected with a giggle. "And Daddy's the best teacher ever. He taught me last summer, and I caught 3 fish." Marcus gathered their old fishing gear from the garage while the girls changed into play clothes. He found Emily in one of Ava's old t-shirts and jean shorts, a far cry from the expensive outfit she'd arrived in, but her smile was brighter than any designer label could make it. The drive to Lake Thompson took 20 minutes, their old pickup truck rumbling down quiet country roads. Marcus chose a secluded spot away from the usual fishing areas, where tall pines provided shade and privacy. The late afternoon sun painted everything golden, and the lake surface sparkled like scattered diamonds. "First things first," Marcus announced, pulling out 3 fishing poles. "We need to bait our hooks." Emily's nose wrinkled at the sight of the worms, but she watched intently as Marcus demonstrated. "You have to be gentle," he explained. "Even with a worm, everything deserves to be treated with respect." After teaching Emily the basics of casting, they settled into the peaceful rhythm of fishing. The only sounds were crickets starting their evening song and the occasional plop of a line hitting the water. Marcus watched Emily's face as she concentrated on her task, her tongue poking out slightly. "Mr. Marcus?" Emily asked after a while, her voice soft. "Why are some people in town mean to you?" Marcus's heart clenched. He took a deep breath, looking out over the water. "Sometimes people are scared of what's different from them. They don't understand that love doesn't care about what someone looks like or where they come from." "But you're the nicest person I know," Emily insisted. "You make me feel safe." "Safer than," she trailed off, fiddling with her fishing pole. "Safer than what, honey?" Marcus prompted gently. "Safer than I've ever felt before," she whispered. "Even at home." Before Marcus could respond, Ava's line suddenly went taut. "Daddy, I got something." The moment shifted to excitement as they helped Ava reel in a decent-sized bass. Emily clapped and jumped up and down, her previous words hanging in the air like the evening mist starting to rise off the lake. As the sun began its descent, Marcus built a small fire in the designated pit. He cleaned their catch. They'd managed to get 3 fish between them and wrapped them in foil with lemon and herbs he'd brought from home. "This is better than any restaurant," Emily declared, carefully picking apart her fish with her fingers. Her face glowed in the firelight, smudged with dirt and happiness. Ava leaned against Marcus's side, her paper plate balanced on her knees. "Daddy," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "Can Emily stay with us forever?" Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes as he looked at his daughter's hopeful face. Baby, you know that's not. Please? Tears spilled down Ava's cheeks. She's like my sister now, and she's happy here. Aren't you happy here, Emily? Emily nodded vigorously, setting down her plate and moving to Marcus's other side. The happiest, she confirmed, her small hand finding his larger one. Marcus wrapped his arms around both girls, his heart full and heavy at the same time. Sometimes the right thing and the hard thing are the same thing, he said softly. We have to trust that God has a plan, even when we don't understand it. They sat there together, watching the fire dance and listening to the evening sounds of the lake. Marcus told them stories about fishing with his own father, and Ava taught Emily the camp song she'd learned at church retreat. As dusk settled in earnest, Marcus began packing up their supplies. The girls helped gather the fishing gear, still humming the songs they'd been singing. The moment felt perfect, peaceful in a way that had become rare these past few days. Then Marcus's phone rang. The sound cut through the evening, quiet like a knife. Marcus pulled it from his pocket, recognizing the police station's number. His hand trembled slightly as he answered. Mr. Johnson? Officer Peterson's voice crackled through the speaker. We've located Emily's parents. Marcus looked at the girls, still gathering up their things, still smiling, still innocent to how everything was about to change. Emily caught his eye and gave him a bright wave, holding up Ava's tackle box proudly. Mr. Johnson, are you there? Yes, Marcus managed, his voice rough. Yes, I'm here. The fluorescent lights of the community center buzzed overhead as Marcus stood in the empty meeting room, his hand firmly holding Emily's smaller one. His daughter Ava waited with Pastor James in the hallway. They had all agreed it would be better for her not to witness this moment. The polished wooden floors and neat rows of chairs seemed to mock the heaviness in his heart. Emily squeezed his hand tighter. I'm scared, she whispered, her other arm clutching her stuffed rabbit close to her chest. It's okay to be scared, Marcus said softly, kneeling down to her level. But remember what we talked about? Your mama and daddy have been worried sick about you. The little girl's bottom lip trembled. But they're never home. They don't make pancakes or tell stories or... Her voice cracked. Before Marcus could respond, the double doors swung open. A tall man in an expensive suit strode in, followed by an elegant woman wearing pearls and a designer dress. Mrs. Whitmore's perfectly made-up face crumpled at the sight of her daughter. Emily, she cried out, her heels clicking rapidly across the floor. Emily's grip on Marcus's hand tightened, but she took a hesitant step forward. Mommy? The reunion happened in a blur of motion. Mrs. Whitmore swept Emily into her arms, pressing kisses to her face, while Mr. Whitmore wrapped them both in an embrace. Their expensive perfume and cologne filled the air, so different from the simple soap and motor oil scents Emily had grown used to over the past days. Oh, my baby, my precious girl, Mrs. Whitmore sobbed, mascara running down her cheeks. We've been searching everywhere for you. Mr. Whitmore pulled back first, his stern face set in harsh lines as he studied his daughter. Are you hurt? Did anyone? His eyes cut to Marcus, who stood quietly nearby. No, Daddy. Marcus took care of me. He and Ava are my family too now, Emily said, reaching out to grab Marcus's hand again. They made me feel safe and loved and... Emily! Mr. Whitmore's voice turned sharp. Come here. The little girl shrank back, pressing against Marcus's leg. No! I want to stay with Marcus! Mrs. Whitmore's face flickered with something, understanding perhaps, or guilt, as she watched her daughter cling to this stranger who had become so important. Mr. Whitmore straightened his tie, his jaw clenched. He turned to Marcus with cold eyes. We appreciate you looking after our daughter, Mr. Johnson. We'll make sure you're properly compensated for any expenses. I don't want money, sir, Marcus interrupted quietly. I just wanted to keep her safe. Yes, well. Mr. Whitmore's lip curled slightly. The situation is resolved now. Emily, come along. But Emily wrapped her arms around Marcus's waist, burying her face against him. No, please don't make me go. Marcus reads me stories and makes me feel better when I'm scared and... Emily Grace Whitmore, her father's voice boomed through the room. That's enough. Marcus felt Emily trembling against him. Gently, he placed his hands on her shoulders, though his own heart was breaking. "Emily, sweetheart, look at me." Tear-filled blue eyes met his warm brown one. "Your mama and daddy love you very much. They've been so worried about you," Marcus said softly, even as Emily shook her head. "Sometimes love looks different in different families, but it's still love." Mr. Whitmore stepped closer, his expensive shoes squeaking on the floor. He leaned down, speaking in a low voice meant only for Marcus. "You'll never understand our world. We'll take it from here." The words stung like a physical blow. Marcus straightened up, dignity in every line of his body, despite the pain in his chest. Mrs. Whitmore moved forward, her manicured hands reaching for Emily. "Come along, darling. We'll go home now." "No!" Emily screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. She wrapped herself around Marcus's legs. "Please don't make me go. Please! I want to stay with Marcus and Ava." Mr. Whitmore's patience snapped. He strode forward and physically pried Emily away from Marcus, lifting her struggling form into his arms. Emily kicked and screamed, reaching desperately for Marcus, her stuffed rabbit falling forgotten to the floor. "Marcus, please, don't let them take me." Her cries pierced straight through his heart. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, tears rolling down his cheeks as he watched Mr. Whitmore carry Emily toward the door. Mrs. Whitmore paused to retrieve the fallen rabbit, her hand shaking slightly as she clutched it. "Thank you," she whispered to Marcus, something like understanding in her eyes. But then she turned and hurried after her husband. Emily's screams echoed down the hallway, growing fainter but no less heartbreaking. "Marcus! Marcus!" And then silence fell in the empty community center. Marcus's legs gave out, and he sank into one of the chairs, his whole body trembling. He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The sound of small footsteps made him look up. Ava stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. She ran to him, and he gathered her in his arms, holding her close as they both cried for the little girl who had become such an important part of their family. "Why, Daddy?" Ava whispered against his shirt. "Why did they have to take her like that?" Marcus had no answer. He just held his daughter tighter, his soul shattered into 1,000 pieces, wondering how something that felt so right could end so wrong. Through the community center's windows, he could hear car doors slamming and engines starting, the sound of Emily's new world carrying her away from the simple love she'd found in his modest home, leaving behind only memories and a father's broken heart. The kitchen felt different that evening. Marcus stared at the empty chair where Emily had sat just hours ago, her presence still lingering like a ghost. The macaroni and cheese, Emily's favorite, sat untouched on both his and Ava's plates. The only sounds were the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the occasional scrape of forks against plates as they pushed their food around without eating. Ava hadn't spoken since they'd returned home. Her eyes were red and puffy, fixed on the empty chair across from her. The chair where Emily had told silly jokes that made milk come out of Ava's nose. The chair where Emily had helped them say grace, her small voice earnest and pure. Marcus watched his daughter, his heart breaking all over again. She'd lost so much already, first her mother, and now Emily, who had become like a sister to her in such a short time. The bond between the girls had been instant and deep, as if God himself had woven their hearts together. "Baby, you need to eat something," Marcus said softly, reaching across to touch Ava's hand. She pulled away, her lower lip trembling. "I'm not hungry." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Just a few bites, please." He tried to keep his voice steady, to be strong for her. Ava picked up her fork, then dropped it with a clatter. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why, Daddy? Why does kindness always lose?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd asked himself the same thing countless times today, watching Emily being pulled away from them. The memory of her screams still echoed in his mind. "I don't know, baby," he admitted, his own voice thick with emotion. Sometimes things don't make sense. We loved her," Ava sobbed, her small shoulders shaking. "We loved her and took care of her and made her feel safe. Isn't that what you always say we should do? Help people who need help?" Marcus pushed back his chair, and walked around the table, gathering Ava into his arms. She buried her face in his shirt, her tears soaking through to his skin. He held her close, gently rocking her like he used to when she was smaller. "Yes, baby. That's exactly what we should do. And I'm proud of you for loving Emily so well." "Then why did they take her?" Mr. Whitmore looked at us like we were nothing. Ava's words came out between hiccups. Like everything we did didn't matter. Marcus closed his eyes, fighting back his own tears. How could he explain prejudice to his 10-year-old daughter? How could he make sense of something that had never made sense to him? "Come on," he said finally. "Let's get you ready for bed." He carried Ava upstairs to her room, helping her change into her pajamas when her hands shook too much to manage the buttons. Her eyes kept drifting to the sleeping bag still rolled up in the corner, the one Emily had used that first night, before they'd brought in the spare mattress. Marcus tucked her into bed, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Would you like me to read you a story?" Ava shook her head, fresh tears spilling. "Can you just stay until I fall asleep?" "Of course, baby." He sat on the edge of her bed, holding her hand as she curled up on her side. "Daddy?" Her voice was small in the darkness. "Yes? Do you think Emily is crying too?" Marcus's heart clenched. "I think she probably is, baby. Can we pray for her?" "We sure can." Together, they prayed for Emily, asking God to comfort her and keep her safe. Ava's voice grew slower and heavier until she finally drifted off to sleep, her hand still clutching his. Marcus stayed a few minutes longer, watching her sleep, before quietly making his way downstairs and out onto the front porch. The night air was cool and still, stars twinkling overhead like distant promises. He sank into the old wooden rocking chair, the same one where he'd sat holding Emily that first night, when she'd been too scared to sleep. The same chair where he'd watched the girls play hopscotch on the sidewalk, their laughter floating up like music. Now the porch felt empty, the silence deafening. Marcus looked up at the star-filled sky, his faith wavering for the first time in years. "Lord," he whispered, his voice breaking, "why did you bring her to me, only to take her away?" The stars offered no answer, just continued their silent vigil over a world that suddenly felt colder and darker than before. The gentle creaking of the rocking chair kept time with his troubled thoughts, a lonely rhythm in the quiet night. The porch light cast long shadows across the weathered boards, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Marcus sat there, wrestling with questions that had no answers, feeling the weight of loss pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden. He thought of Emily's father's cold words, the way the man had looked through him rather than at him. He thought of Emily's terrified screams as they'd carried her away, and how helpless he'd felt in that moment. Most of all, he thought about Ava's question, why does kindness always lose? The night offered no comfort, no divine revelation, just the endless stars above and the echo of empty spaces in his home and heart, where a little girl's laughter used to be. 2 days crawled by like molasses in winter. Marcus stood under a raised Honda Civic at Johnson's auto shop, his wrench turning methodically as motor oil dripped onto his coveralls. The familiar smells of grease and metal couldn't mask the emptiness that followed him from home. Every few minutes, his hand would pause on a bolt, remembering how Emily had sat on the old waiting room couch just last week, watching him work with fascination. The radio played quietly in the background, its country music doing little to drown out Mrs. Peterson's voice at the front counter. "Such a shame," she said loudly to Bill, another mechanic. "Getting those girls' hopes up like that. Should have known better than to play house with someone else's child." Marcus tightened the bolt harder than necessary, his jaw clenched. He'd been hearing variations of the same sentiment since Emily left, at the grocery store, at church, even from some of his regular customers. The whispers had transformed from suspicion to a different kind of judgment, pity mixed with criticism. At Ava's school, things weren't any better. Her teacher, Mrs. Roberts, had called during lunch break. "Ava seems distracted," she'd said gently. She spent most of math class drawing pictures of 3 people holding hands. Maybe she could talk to the school counselor? Marcus wiped his hands on a shop rag and rolled out from under the car. The afternoon sun slanted through the garage doors, highlighting the empty spot where Emily used to do her homework. His phone buzzed, another text from Ava. "Can we have pizza tonight? The kind Emily liked?" His heart squeezed. Everything reminded them of her. The pink hair tie she'd left on the bathroom counter. The extra toothbrush he couldn't bring himself to throw away. The half-finished puzzle on their coffee table. "Johnson?" Tommy, his boss, called from the office. "Got a minute?" Marcus walked over, his work boots heavy on the concrete floor. Tommy sat behind his cluttered desk, looking uncomfortable. "Listen, Marcus. You're my best mechanic, but these past couple days, your head's not in it. Had to redo that brake job twice yesterday. Won't happen again," Marcus said quietly, straightening his shoulders. Tommy sighed. "Look, I heard about what happened with that little girl. Half the town's talking about it. Maybe you should take a few days off?" "I need the work, Tommy. Ava's got that school trip coming up and—" "It's paid leave," Tommy interrupted, not meeting his eyes. "Just get yourself sorted out." Marcus wanted to argue, but the pitying look on Tommy's face stopped him. It was the same look he'd seen at church on Sunday, when people patted his shoulder and said things like, "The Lord works in mysterious ways," and "Everything happens for a reason." Later that afternoon, he found himself sitting in Pastor James's office, the familiar scent of old books and coffee bringing a small measure of comfort. The pastor listened quietly as Marcus spoke about the weight pressing down on him, the whispers, the judgment, the ache of loss. "You know what burns the most," Marcus said, his voice rough. "People acting like I should have known better, like loving that child was some kind of mistake." Pastor James leaned forward in his chair, his weathered face kind. "Marcus, sometimes the seeds we plant don't bloom where we can see them. That little girl knew love in your home, real, unconditional love. That doesn't vanish just because she's gone." "But what good did it do?" Marcus asked. "She's back in her world of privilege, probably being told to forget about us." "The impact we leave on others isn't always visible," Pastor James replied, picking up his worn Bible. "It's like this verse in Ecclesiastes. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Your kindness, your love, they create ripples we can't always see." Marcus nodded, but the words felt hollow against the emptiness in his chest. After leaving the church, he drove back to the shop to finish up some paperwork. The place was quiet now, everyone else gone home. In the dim light of his office, he noticed something poking out from under some invoices. It was one of Ava's drawings. She must have left it when she visited yesterday after school. The paper showed 3 stick figures holding hands, a tall one wearing mechanic's coveralls, 2 smaller ones with big smiles. Emily was in the middle, her stick figure hair colored yellow with crayon, wearing the blue dress she'd had on the night they found her. Above the figures, Ava had written in careful letters, "My family." Marcus sat heavily in his chair, the paper trembling in his hands. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as he traced the crayon lines with his finger. 3 simple figures that represented everything he'd gained and lost in the span of a week. The empty shop seemed to echo with phantom sounds. Emily's giggle as she watched him fix cars, Ava teaching her their special handshake, the 2 girls sharing secrets in whispered voices. He remembered Emily's words the day before she left. "You feel like home." Now home felt like a house of echoes. Marcus stared at the drawing until his vision blurred, remembering Emily's face as she was carried away. The terror in her eyes, the way she'd reached for him, screaming his name. He'd stood there, helpless, watching another piece of his heart being torn away. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. It was late, past closing time. Marcus should go home, where Ava waited with her own quiet grief. But he sat there a moment longer, holding the drawing, allowing himself to feel the full weight of what they'd lost. Not just Emily, but the dream of what their little family could have been. The kitchen felt too big these days. Marcus pushed his mashed potatoes around his plate, watching Ava do the same across the table. Neither of them had much appetite lately. The empty chair between them seemed to mock their loss, a constant reminder of the little girl who'd brought so much light into their home. "You need to eat something, sweetheart," Marcus said softly, though his own plate was barely touched. Ava sighed, her fork scraping against the ceramic. "I'm not really hungry, Daddy." The ceiling fan whirred overhead, its gentle rhythm filling the silence that had become too familiar in their home. Marcus glanced at the refrigerator where Emily's crayon drawings still hung, bright splashes of color that made his heart ache. "Maybe we could make cookies later," he suggested, trying to lift the heavy mood. Baking had always been their special activity, but even that reminder brought a fresh wave of sadness. Emily had loved helping them in the kitchen, her face covered in flour as she giggled at their silly baking songs. "It wouldn't be the same," Ava whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her small hand. "I know, baby, I know." The sound of knocking echoed through the house, sharp and unexpected in the evening quiet. Marcus froze, his hand still holding Ava's. They rarely got visitors these days. Most folks in town either avoided them or whispered behind their backs. Another knock, more insistent this time. "Stay here," Marcus told Ava, rising from his chair. His footsteps seemed too loud on the worn hardwood floor as he made his way to the front door. The porch light cast long shadows through the window, and he could make out multiple figures standing outside. Marcus's heart thumped heavily in his chest as he opened the door. The sight before him made him grip the doorframe for support. There stood the Whitmores, looking completely different from their last encounter. Mrs. Whitmore's elegant appearance was marred by red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. Mr. Whitmore's usual stern expression had been replaced by something softer, almost uncertain, and between them. "Marcus!" Emily broke free from her parents' grip and launched herself at him, her small body colliding with his legs as she wrapped her arms around him tight enough to hurt. "Marcus! Marcus! Marcus!" He instinctively knelt down, gathering her close as she sobbed into his shoulder. The familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo hit him like a physical blow. "Emily," he breathed, his own eyes filling with tears. "Daddy!" Ava's voice rang out from behind him. She raced forward, joining their embrace as Emily reached for her with one arm, never letting go of Marcus with the other. Mrs. Whitmore stepped forward, her designer heels clicking softly on the porch boards. "She hasn't stopped crying," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "For 2 days, she's barely eaten, barely slept. She just keeps asking for you both." Marcus looked up, still holding both girls close. Mrs. Whitmore's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the way her lip trembled as she spoke. "Every night, she cries herself to sleep calling for you," she continued, dabbing at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. "She tells us how you made her feel safe, how Ava taught her games and songs, how you," her voice broke, "how you tucked her in at night and checked under the bed for monsters." Emily's fingers curled tighter in Marcus's shirt. "You didn't say prayers with me," she whispered against his neck. "They didn't know how to do it right." The simple statement hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He smoothed Emily's hair, remembering their nightly ritual of prayers and silly stories. Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat, looking more uncertain than Marcus had ever seen him. The proud businessman who had dismissed Marcus so coldly now stood with his shoulders slightly hunched, his expensive suit seeming to hang differently on his frame. "Mr. Johnson," he said, his voice rough. "Marcus, why, we?" He glanced at his wife, who nodded encouragingly. "Would you mind if we came in to talk?" Marcus stood slowly, Emily refusing to let go so that he had to lift her with him. Ava pressed against his side, her small hand finding Emily's, as if afraid she might disappear again. "Of course," Marcus said, stepping back to make room. "Please, come in." Mrs. Whitmore entered first, her eyes taking in the modest furnishings of Marcus's home with none of the judgment he might have expected days ago. Instead, she seemed to be drinking in the details of the place her daughter had called home, the family photos on the walls, the well-worn but clean furniture, the school artwork proudly displayed. Mr. Whitmore followed, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. He stood awkwardly just inside, looking at Emily still clinging to Marcus with an expression of dawning understanding. "Could we sit down?" he asked quietly. "I believe I owe you an apology, a very big one." Marcus nodded, shifting Emily in his arms. She showed no signs of wanting to be put down, and honestly, he wasn't ready to let her go either. "We can talk in the living room," he said, leading the way while Ava stuck close to his side. The very same room where he'd spent countless hours questioning his faith over the past 2 days now held the answer to his prayers, even if he didn't yet know exactly what that answer would be. But with Emily's warm weight in his arms and the Whitmores' humbled presence before him, Marcus felt hope stirring in his heart for the first time since that bitter farewell at the community center. Marcus's small living room had never felt quite so crowded. The Whitmores perched awkwardly on his well-worn couch, their designer clothes a stark contrast to the humble furnishings. Mrs. Whitmore's perfectly manicured hands fidgeted in her lap, while her husband's shoulders remained stiff, though his expression had softened considerably from their last encounter. Emily, however, showed no signs of discomfort. She sat snugly between Marcus and Ava on the love seat across from her parents, her small hand intertwined with Marcus's larger one. The stuffed rabbit she'd arrived with that rainy night sat in her lap, a silent witness to how far they'd all come. "Mr. Johnson," Mr. Whitmore began, clearing his throat. I owe you an apology." His voice cracked slightly, surprising even his wife, who placed a gentle hand on his arm. "When I said you'd never understand our world, I was the one who didn't understand." Marcus remained silent, his free hand resting protectively on Ava's shoulder. The ceiling fan whirred softly above them, its steady rhythm filling the thoughtful pause. "Emily hasn't been the same since we left, Mrs. Whitmore added, her eyes glistening. "She wouldn't eat, wouldn't smile. She kept asking for you and Ava, saying she felt safer here than she's ever felt anywhere else." Emily squeezed Marcus's hand tighter. "Because they love me for real," she said simply, with the pure honesty only a child could muster. "Not because they have to." Mr. Whitmore winced at his daughter's words, but nodded slowly. "You're right, sweetheart. And that's what made me realize how wrong I was." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out an envelope. "Mr. Johnson, what you did for Emily wasn't just about keeping her safe. You showed all of us, what real family looks like." Marcus shook his head slightly. "I just did what any decent person would do." "No," Mrs. Whitmore interjected, her voice firm. "You did so much more. You opened your heart and your home. You faced judgment and suspicion. Yet you still chose kindness." Mr. Whitmore leaned forward, holding out the envelope. "That's why we're here. This isn't charity, Mr. Johnson. This is an investment in hope." Marcus took the envelope with slightly trembling hands. When he opened it, his eyes widened. The check inside bore more zeros than he'd ever seen in his life. $1 million, Mr. Whitmore stated matter-of-factly. "To build a youth center right here in town. A place where every child can feel as safe and loved as Emily did with you." Ava gasped, peering at the check in her father's hands. "Daddy, is it real?" Emily bounced excitedly between them. "Now other kids can feel safe too, like a big family." Marcus stared at the check, his vision blurring with tears. His lips moved in a silent prayer of gratitude, his heart too full for words. Everything he'd endured, the whispers, the accusations, the fear, had led to this moment of divine providence. Mrs. Whitmore wiped her own tears, smiling through them. "We want to be part of this, Mr. Johnson, not just with money, but with real partnership. Emily showed us what truly matters, and we want to help make that difference for other children too. Will you let us help, Mr. Johnson?" Mr. Whitmore asked, his usual businesslike demeanor replaced with genuine humility. "Will you let us be part of making this town a better place?" Marcus looked around his small living room, at Ava's hopeful face, at Emily's joyful smile, at the Whitmores' sincere expressions, and saw more than just people. He saw bridges being built, walls coming down, and love winning over fear. The check in his hands wasn't just money, it was a symbol of transformation, of hearts changed and lives touched. His fingers traced the amount written on the check as he whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for showing us your way." The tears he'd been holding back finally fell freely, but these were tears of joy, of answered prayers, of faith rewarded. Emily hugged him tightly, her voice muffled against his shirt. "See? I told you you were special, Marcus. Now everybody else knows it too." The morning sun cast long shadows across the empty lot where Marcus Johnson stood, blueprints clutched in his weathered hands. Construction workers bustled around him, their yellow hard hats bobbing like dandelions in a sea of activity. The steady thrum of machinery filled the air as bulldozers cleared the land for what would soon become the Johnson Whitmore Youth Center. "Daddy, look!" Ava called out, pointing to where the foundation markers were being placed. She stood safely behind the temporary fence with Emily, both girls practically bouncing with excitement. "That's where the playground's gonna be." Emily nodded eagerly, her blonde hair catching the sunlight. "And the library's going right there," she added, gesturing to another section of the lot, "with big windows so kids can read in the sunshine." Marcus smiled, his heart full as he watched the two girls who had changed his life forever. Emily visited every weekend now, her parents having recognized the special bond that had formed between the families. The $1 million check that had seemed almost unreal just weeks ago was now transforming into something tangible, a dream taking shape in steel and concrete. "Mr. Johnson?" A construction foreman approached, hard hat in hand. "Some of the locals are asking if they can help with the build." Marcus turned to see a small group of townspeople gathering near the site entrance. Among them, he recognized faces that had once viewed him with suspicion. Mrs. Henderson, who'd called the police that first week Emily was with them, now held a box of donuts and wore an apologetic smile. Mr. Turner, the grocery store clerk who'd whispered harsh words, stood beside her with work gloves in his hands. "The more help, the better," Marcus said, his voice warm and welcoming. "There's plenty of work to go around." As the morning progressed, more townspeople arrived. Some brought food for the workers, others offered their skills. Electricians, carpenters, painters. The atmosphere felt like an old-fashioned barn raising, where community spirit overcame old prejudices. Pastor James arrived just before noon, his presence drawing everyone together naturally. He moved through the crowd, greeting people with handshakes and warm smiles, before making his way to Marcus. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," Pastor James said, clasping Marcus's shoulder. "Look at how he's brought these people together." Marcus nodded, watching as Ava and Emily helped distribute water bottles to the workers. "When I found Emily that rainy night, I never imagined it would lead to this. Sometimes the greatest blessings come from our biggest challenges," Pastor James replied. "Shall we dedicate the land?" Word spread quickly, and soon everyone gathered in a large circle around the cleared center of the lot. Pastor James raised his hands, and a reverent hush fell over the crowd. "Dear Heavenly Father," he began, his voice carrying across the construction site, "we gather today to dedicate this land and the vision that will rise from it. Let this center be a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of love over fear, of understanding over prejudice." Marcus felt Ava slip her small hand into his on one side, and Emily did the same on the other. Tears pricked at his eyes as Pastor James continued. "Bless every child who will find shelter within these walls. Bless every volunteer who will share their time and talents. And bless Marcus Johnson, whose courage and compassion showed us all a better way." "Amen," the crowd responded in unison. Throughout the afternoon, Marcus watched in amazement as former critics became eager helpers. Mrs. Henderson approached him during a water break, her eyes downcast. "I was wrong about you, Marcus," she said softly. "I let fear cloud my judgment. Can you forgive me?" "Already forgiven," Marcus replied without hesitation. "What matters is where we go from here." One by one, others came forward with similar apologies. Each conversation helped heal old wounds, building bridges where walls had once stood. The girls watched it all, their faces glowing with pride. As the sun began its descent, the day's work drew to a close. The foundation markers were all in place, the land cleared and ready for the next phase of construction. Workers and volunteers began packing up their tools, exchanging phone numbers and promises to return tomorrow. Marcus led Ava and Emily to where the foundation stone would be placed, the cornerstone of not just a building, but a new chapter for their community. The stone itself lay ready, carved with simple words, built with love, founded on faith. "Can we touch it?" Emily asked, reaching out hesitantly. "Of course," Marcus smiled. "This belongs to all of us." The three of them stood there, hand in hand, their shadows stretching long across the freshly cleared ground. The foundation stone before them represented more than just the beginning of a building. It was the foundation of hope, of healing, of a community coming together to create something beautiful from a moment that could have torn them apart. Behind them, Pastor James's voice carried on the evening breeze as he spoke with the last remaining volunteers. Birds called their evening songs from nearby trees, and the cooling air carried the promise of tomorrow's possibilities. Marcus squeezed both girls' hands gently, feeling their small fingers tighten in response. In that moment, standing before the foundation stone with Ava and Emily beside him, he felt the full weight of God's grace. This center would be more than just a building. It would be a testament to the power of love to transform hearts and heal divisions. The autumn breeze carried laughter and music across the freshly painted grounds of the Johnson Whitmore Center for Hope. The grand opening banner fluttered proudly above the entrance, its letters bold against the clear blue sky. Children of every color and background darted through the courtyard, their joy painting the air with the sounds of genuine happiness. Marcus Johnson stood at the center's entrance, his heart swelling with pride. The modern building gleamed with possibility, its walls adorned with colorful murals of children playing, its windows sparkling in the afternoon light. Inside, state-of-the-art computers hummed in the learning center, while the craft room buzzed with creative energy. "Daddy, look!" Ava called out, waving from the basketball court where she and Emily were teaching younger kids how to dribble. The two girls had become inseparable, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Emily's weekend visits had become a cherished routine, bringing completeness to their family circle. Mrs. Whitmore approached Marcus, her designer dress a stark contrast to her humble smile. "I never thought I'd say this, Marcus, but you've taught our family more about love than all our years of privilege ever did." She watched Emily laugh with Ava, her eyes glistening. "Look how she shines here. She's truly happy." The community had turned out in full force for the opening. Even those who had once whispered cruel words now stood in line to shake Marcus's hand. Pastor James moved through the crowd, blessing children and sharing warm words with parents. Mr. Whitmore took the microphone at the podium set up near the center's entrance. The crowd hushed, and Emily ran to stand beside Marcus and Ava, slipping her small hand into his. "Friends and neighbors," Mr. Whitmore began, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "When my daughter Emily went missing that rainy night, I thought my world had ended. But God had a greater plan. He led her to a man whose heart was bigger than any prejudice, whose faith was stronger than fear." He paused, emotion thick in his voice. "Marcus Johnson didn't just shelter my daughter. He showed her what real fatherly love looks like. He taught me humility, and he taught this town about the power of seeing beyond skin color to the heart beneath." Marcus felt Emily squeeze his hand tighter. Ava leaned against his other side, proud tears sliding down her cheeks. "This center, Mr. Whitmore continued, gesturing to the building behind him, "isn't just a place for children to play. It's a testament to what happens when we choose love over fear, when we let go of our preconceptions and embrace each other as family." The crowd applauded, and Marcus noticed several of his former critics wiping away tears. Mrs. Anassa Peterson, who had once called the police on him, now stood with her grandchildren, nodding in agreement with every word. Emily tugged at Marcus's sleeve. "Can we show everyone the library, please?" Her eyes sparkled with excitement. The library had been her special project. She had helped select every book, insisting on stories about courage, friendship, and breaking down barriers. Marcus led the tours himself, showing off the center's facilities, the computer lab where kids could do homework and learn coding, the music room filled with donated instruments, the kitchen where cooking classes would teach healthy eating. Every space was designed to nurture, to protect, to inspire. As afternoon mellowed into evening, families lingered in the courtyard, sharing food and stories. Children from different neighborhoods played together, their laughter a melody of hope. The walls that had once divided the community seemed to crumble with each shared smile. Pastor James found Marcus watching the scene from a quiet corner. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he said softly. "Who would have thought that one lost little girl would lead to all of this?" The sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, casting a magical glow over the center. Most families had headed home, but a few children still played on the new equipment, their shadows long against the golden light. Ava and Emily sat on the swings, their matching friendship bracelets glinting in the fading Sunday. They had made them together the day the center's construction began, a symbol of their unbreakable bond. Marcus walked over to his girls, his heart full. Emily jumped off her swing and ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Thank you for making a place where everyone can feel safe," she whispered. Ava joined them, her eyes bright with understanding beyond her years. "Remember when I asked why kindness never wins, Daddy?" Marcus nodded, drawing both girls close. The setting sun wrapped them in its warm embrace, a perfect backdrop for this moment of triumph. He looked at their joined hands, his strong dark one, Ava's smaller brown one, and Emily's pale fingers all intertwined against the golden light. "See, sweetheart?" he whispered to Ava, his voice thick with emotion. "Kindness does win. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Marcus Johnson, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.